in a room filled with 1,000 powerful people. One pregnant woman stood completely alone. He believed humiliation would remind her of her place. What he didn't know was that he had just revealed his own. Real power doesn't shout. It arrives quietly and leaves nothing standing. The grand ballroom glittered like a palace built for gods, not people. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over marble floors, diamond gowns, tailored suits, and the quiet arrogance of the elite. This wasn't just a charity gala. It was a stage where power loved to be seen. 1,000 guests filled the room. At the center stood the CEO, confident, celebrated, untouchable. Beside him stood his wife, pregnant, silent. Her hand rested unconsciously on her stomach, fingers curved protectively over the life inside her. She wore a simple, elegant dress, but compared to the extravagance around her, she looked almost out of place, too real for a room built on illusion. The CEO took the microphone. Laughter rippled as he began speaking, jokes about success, ambition, legacy. Then his tone shifted. His eyes slid toward his wife, not with affection, but amusement. "Pregnancy really changes people, doesn't it?" he said, smiling. "Some more than others." A few guests laughed. Others glanced away. "She used to be sharper," he continued. "But I suppose not everyone is built to keep up in my world." The silence thickened. He went further, commenting on her background, her lack of pedigree, how she should be grateful for the life he gave her. Each word landed like a slap, public and deliberate. Then he gestured toward the side of the stage. "Come here," he said. The mistress appeared, beautiful, confident, dressed in a way that demanded attention. Gasps moved through the crowd, followed by murmurs and raised phones. The CEO smiled wider. "Why don't you tell them what you told me?" he encouraged. The mistress stepped closer, eyes scanning the pregnant woman from head to toe with open contempt. "She's ordinary," she said lightly. "I don't understand why you ever settled." A glass lifted, wine spilled. It soaked into the pregnant woman's dress, red spreading like a wound. Laughter erupted, too loud, too fast. Phones rose higher. Some people watched in horror. Most did nothing. The pregnant wife didn't move. She froze, every muscle locked, not in weakness, but instinct. Both hands went to her belly, shielding her unborn child, as if the world itself had turned hostile. The CEO leaned in, voice cold enough to cut glass. "She was never my equal," he said into the microphone. "Just a tool I used to get where I am." The room applauded. What no one noticed, what no one could have imagined, was that this moment, meant to break her, was being watched far beyond that ballroom. And when the doors finally opened, everything would change. Years earlier, before the chandeliers and the applause, before the tailored suits and magazine covers, he had been nobody, a struggling man with big dreams and empty pockets. He used to sit across from her in cheap cafes, hands wrapped around cracked ceramic mugs, talking about the empire he would one day build. He spoke with hunger in his eyes, insecurity masked as ambition. Everyone else saw a man chasing fantasies. She saw potential. She paid bills he was too proud to admit he couldn't cover. She edited his presentations late into the night, sitting beside him while he practiced pitches that investors kept rejecting. When he failed, she was there. When he doubted himself, she believed harder, for both of them. What he never truly understood was who she really was. She didn't talk about her family. She never mentioned the private jets, the boardrooms, the empires quietly controlled behind closed doors. She had been raised in power, but never taught to flaunt it. Her three brothers ruled industries people whispered about, not posted online. When they met him, they saw through him immediately. They warned her, softly at first, then more firmly. They pointed out the red flags, the inconsistencies, the way his love always seemed tied to opportunity. She fought them, accused them of control, of arrogance, of never believing she could choose her own happiness. For the first time in her life, she wanted love without power attached to it. So she walked away. She cut ties with her family, refused her inheritance, changed her number, married quietly, without headlines or luxury, believing she was proving something, to herself most of all. For years, she lived smaller than she was born to. She watched him rise while she faded into the background, telling herself that sacrifice was love, that patience would be rewarded. The pregnancy felt like redemption, a chance to soften him, to rebuild what success had hardened. She believed a child would remind him who they once were. Two people against the world. She didn't know the world had already turned against her. She didn't know her brothers had never stopped watching from a distance. And she didn't know that the silence she carried with such dignity. He had mistaken for weakness. The room was already loud with laughter when he decided to finish her. With a lazy confidence born from power and applause, he wrapped an arm around the woman standing far too close to him. There was no hesitation this time, no attempt at secrecy. He wanted everyone to see. He wanted her to understand. "Yes," he said smoothly, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "Scarlett is with me, and she has been for a long time." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd, quickly smothered by curiosity and cruel excitement. Phones rose higher. Whispers turned into smiles. The mistress tilted her head, studying the pregnant woman as if examining something beneath her. Her lips curved with practiced disdain. "She's ordinary," she said lightly. "No name, no legacy, no bloodline worth mentioning. Did you really think a man like him would stay with someone like you?" Laughter broke out, too loud, too eager. The pregnant woman swayed, one hand instinctively pressing against her belly, the other gripping the edge of the table beside her. Her gown clung to her skin, still damp from the earlier spill, the cold seeping deeper now. She didn't scream, she didn't lash out. She looked at him, just once, and in that look was everything she had given him. "Please," she whispered. The word barely survived the noise. "I'm carrying your child." For a moment, there was silence. Then he smiled. "I never loved you," he said calmly, as if correcting a misunderstanding. "You were useful, that's all." The words landed harder than the drink ever could. Something inside her finally cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. She stood there, soaked, shaking, surrounded by people who either laughed or looked away, protecting her unborn child with her own body as if it were the only thing she had left. And in that moment, he believed he had won. He believed she was finished. The music, died first. Not because someone asked for it to stop, but because the violinist's hands froze mid-note. A low, heavy sound echoed through the ballroom as the massive double doors at the far end slowly began to open. Not slammed, not forced, just opened. With deliberate control. Conversation collapsed into silence. Every head turned. 3 men stepped inside. They didn't rush. They didn't scan the room nervously. They walked with the kind of calm that only comes from absolute authority. The kind that doesn't need permission, doesn't seek approval, and never explains itself. The air changed instantly. People recognized them before they could place the names. Spines straightened, smiles vanished, phones lowered. A few guests actually took a step back, as if instinct alone warned them to make space. This was not drama. This was consequence. The first man was tall, broad-shouldered, his expression carved from restraint rather than anger. The second moved with surgical precision, eyes cold, calculating every face in the room. The third walked slightly behind them, phone already in his hand, thumb moving once, sending something into motion. They didn't look at the stage. They didn't look at the husband. They looked only at her. The pregnant woman stood trembling near the center of the ballroom, soaked, exposed, humiliated, still holding herself together through sheer will. When she saw them, her breath caught, not in fear, in recognition. The eldest brother reached her first. Without a word, he removed his jacket and gently placed it over her shoulders, shielding her from 1,000 eyes. His movements were controlled, almost tender, as if anything too sudden might break her. The second brother stepped in close, steadying her with a light hand at her elbow, grounding her before her knees could give way. He leaned in, just enough for her to hear. "You're safe now." The words shattered what little strength she had left. Around them, no one dared speak. The husband finally turned, irritation flashing across his face, until he saw the expressions around him, until he noticed the sudden, unnatural stillness, until he followed their gazes and truly looked at the 3 men standing between him and his wife. Color drained from his face. Whispers didn't start. They didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew exactly what this meant. This wasn't a confrontation. This was an arrival. For the first time that night, the husband felt something slip. Not anger, not irritation. Fear. It began the moment he truly saw their faces. At first, his mind resisted, scrambling for denial, for excuses, for ignorance. But recognition was merciless. Names surfaced uninvited. Headlines, boardroom whispers, deals that made or broke industries. Her brothers. The blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. He took a half step back without realizing it, his earlier swagger collapsing into something small and brittle. Around him, the guests watched in stunned silence, many already understanding what he had only just grasped. She had never been powerless. She had been protected. The eldest brother finally turned his attention to him. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, almost conversational. "You enjoyed the show," he said. "So did the internet." The husband frowned, confused, until the third brother raised his phone and turned the screen outward. A live feed filled the display. Comments streamed past, too fast to read. View counts climbing by the second. Millions. Multiple angles, the second brother added coolly. Live streams, guest uploads, media pickup already confirmed. The room seemed to tilt. The humiliation he'd orchestrated so carefully, the laughter, the silence, the cameras, had escaped the ballroom. It was everywhere now, permanent, uncontrollable. The husband's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind him, the mistress finally understood. Her confidence evaporated in an instant. She glanced toward the exits, toward security, only to find guards suddenly avoiding her eyes. She took a step back, then another, heels scraping nervously against the marble. I didn't know," she whispered, panic rising. "Marcus, we should go." But Marcus wasn't listening. His gaze darted from brother to brother, calculating, unraveling. His empire, built on image, respect, control, was cracking in real time. Investors would see this, clients would see this, regulators would see this. The laughter from earlier echoed in his head like a curse. "You humiliated her," the eldest brother said softly, "in front of the world." The husband swallowed hard. In seconds, everything he thought he'd proven collapsed. He hadn't displayed power. He had exposed himself. The ballroom's air had shifted completely. What had begun as public humiliation had now become absolute reckoning. The brothers didn't raise their voices. They didn't yell. They didn't storm in. Every move was measured, precise, lethal in its calm. First came the phone calls. Investors received notices of financial irregularities, withdrawal instructions, frozen accounts. Licenses were suspended. Compliance audits initiated. Every paper trail Marcus had relied on for years suddenly became his undoing. The mistress, once confident and untouchable, felt the weight of exposure pressing down. Her connections evaporated in seconds. Colleagues avoided her like a contagion. And then the authorities arrived. FBI agents, tax investigators, and city police quietly but firmly stepped in. Marcus, whose arrogance had filled the room moments before, found himself handcuffed in front of everyone, the cameras still rolling. Elite guests whispered among themselves, many capturing every second. The world was watching. The man who had thought himself untouchable was being dismantled silently, systematically, completely. The room, once buzzing with laughter and whispers, now felt heavy with tension. Every guest realized they were part of what had just unfolded, not as saviors but as silent accomplices. The eldest brother stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the crowd. He spoke calmly, but with an authority that brooked no interruption. "You watched her suffer. You recorded it. You laughed, and in your silence, you allowed cruelty to exist." Phones were lowered. Eyes darted away. Some guests whispered apologies. Others simply froze, aware that their complicity had been exposed. The media narrative shifted instantly. Cameras were no longer tools of amusement. They became instruments of accountability. Every person in the room, every viewer watching the live feeds, now understood the lesson. Cruelty isn't sustained by the wicked alone, but by the indifferent. Isabella's trembling hands were gently guided by her eldest brother as they led her away from the chaos. The cool night air of the courtyard wrapped around her like a protective embrace, far from the stifling ballroom that had witnessed her humiliation. Her brothers, standing silently for a moment, finally broke the quiet. "We waited because we knew you had to see the truth for yourself," Aiden said softly. Grayson added, "But we were never far, Bella. Never." Tears ran freely as Isabella whispered, "I'm sorry for doubting you, for thinking I could do this alone." Miles shook his head firmly, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "No apologies. You are our sister, and that never changed. We love you, always." The three brothers enveloped her in a quiet, steadfast embrace. In that moment, the past 5 years of fear, isolation, and betrayal melted away. Isabella felt a strength she hadn't known, anchored by family, not controlled by them. Protection had a new meaning. Love without chains. Months had passed since the chaos of that unforgettable night at the charity gala. Isabella now sat in the sunlit nursery of her family estate, her newborn daughter Charlotte Rose, peacefully sleeping in her arms. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and polished wood, a stark contrast to the tension, humiliation, and fear she had endured just months ago. Her heart no longer carried the weight of betrayal, but a newfound sense of strength and freedom. Aiden, Grayson, and Miles hovered nearby, not as enforcers or guardians, but as loving uncles, ensuring every need of mother and child was met. Their protective presence was gentle, yet unwavering. Isabella reflected on how their patience, their quiet watchfulness, and their respect for her choices had saved her in more ways than one. They had waited for the perfect moment, not to control, but to protect. Marcus Drake, The man who had once humiliated her so publicly was now confined behind bars, his empire collapsing in front of him. The shame, the exposure, and the legal consequences had left him powerless. Scarlett Hayes' involvement was nullified, her career in ruins, her ambitions crumbling without her manipulative ally. Isabella realized that vengeance was unnecessary. Justice had been served in its purest, most absolute form. She looked down at Charlotte, her tiny fingers curling around hers, and a warmth spread through her that no fear or betrayal could ever touch. This child symbolized not only hope and continuity, but the very essence of the life Isabella had fought for. A life built on love, strength, and family. Every challenge, every moment of despair, had prepared her to embrace this new chapter fully, unafraid and unbroken. The estate hummed with life. Her brothers shared stories, laughter, and gentle teasing, filling the home with a sense of normalcy that Isabella had once feared she'd lost forever. Outside, the gardens bloomed in vibrant colors, a reflection of the life she had reclaimed. The world outside might still remember the scandal, the humiliation, the betrayal. But within these walls, Isabella had reclaimed her narrative. She realized that the greatest power did not come from wealth, titles, or control. It came from love, loyalty, and the courage to walk away from destruction. She had chosen love, not blindly, but wisely. Love for her child, love for herself, and love that came from the steadfast presence of her family. She had learned to value the quiet strength of those who protected, without demanding obedience, who empowered without controlling, and who loved without conditions. As Charlotte cooed softly in her arms, Isabella whispered promises for the life ahead. Lessons in resilience, wisdom, and courage. She would teach her daughter that power comes not from domination, but from compassion and integrity. She would guide her to recognize love that builds and protects, not love that destroys. And most importantly, she would show her the example of standing tall in the face of betrayal, choosing dignity over despair, and courage over fear. The light in the room shifted with the sun, falling on Isabella's face, highlighting the calm, confident smile she now wore. The past's shadows lingered, but only as faint reminders of lessons learned. She was free, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Her daughter's first cries, her brother's laughter echoing through the halls, and the quiet security of the estate, all affirmed a single truth. The life she had feared she lost had been waiting for her all along. Strong hook/final line. She thought choosing love made her weak. She didn't know real power had been waiting for her to come home.